Elijah had always believed the lake was alive. To outsiders, it was just water, calm, glittering under the sun, a place to fish or swim. But to him, it was more than that. It was family. It was history. It was a promise kept through generations. His grandfather had built the dam with his own hands, piling stone after stone, pouring sweat into the soil until the river swelled and created the shimmering body of water that became known as Elijah's Lake. Growing up, Elijah had watched the sunrise dance across its surface, listened to the frogs at night, and felt the cool mist of the water on his skin during summer mornings. This wasn't just land to him. It was sacred. It was the bloodline of his people. But then the world around him began to change. At first, it was small, new families moving into the area, eager for the natural beauty they had read about in glossy magazines. But soon came the HOA. They were organized, loud, and greedy. They looked at the lake not as Elijah's inheritance but as a treasure chest waiting to be emptied. They began with meetings, smooth words and promises about community growth. They said the lake could bring prosperity, attract tourists, and raise property values. Elijah sat in the back of those meetings, quiet, his hands folded, his eyes burning with anger. He stood up once and said, "This water doesn't belong to you." It never did. But they didn't listen. They laughed. They dismissed him. Then came the machines. The roar of bulldozers replaced the calls of the birds. The trees that had stood for centuries were felled in days. And in their place, cabins began to rise. 1 cabin, 5 cabins, 10, and then rows upon rows until there were 139 cabins circling the lake like a crown of greed. Tourists came with their coolers and jet skis, splashing in the water Elijah had once bathed in as a boy. Children screamed with laughter, while their parents drank on the decks of their cabins. None of them cared about the history beneath their feet. None of them knew the stories Elijah's grandfather used to tell, the stories of how the river once ran free, wild, powerful, before the dam tamed it. Elijah walked the shore at night, watching lights flicker in the cabins, his heart heavy with rage. They had taken everything from him. His peace, his heritage, his lake, and still, no one listened. He went to the HOA once more. He told them, "You have no right. You built all this without my blessing, without my consent. This lake exists because of my family. Respect it, or you will regret it." But they only smirked. They told him he was bitter, old-fashioned, and jealous of their success. They told him the lake was for everyone now. What they didn't understand was that the lake wasn't theirs. It never was. The dam that held it together was his. His family had built it. His name was on the papers. The lake only lived because Elijah allowed it to live. So Elijah waited, patient, silent. And then, one morning, he made his choice. The sun had just begun to rise, painting the sky in pink and gold. Families were still asleep in their cabins. Children dreamed of swimming, parents dreamed of lazy mornings by the water. But Elijah was awake. He stood by the dam, his boots planted firmly on the stones his grandfather had laid. He rested his hand on the old steel lever, rusted, worn, but still strong. The very heartbeat of the lake. He closed his eyes, hearing the echo of his grandfather's voice, "This water is life. Treat it with respect, or it will take back what is hers." Elijah pulled the lever. At first, there was only a groan, a deep rumble that shook the earth beneath his feet. Then came the roar. The water, trapped for decades, surged forward like a beast unleashed. It tore through the gates, thundered into the dry riverbeds, and rushed downstream with a fury no man could stop. The lake began to sink. At the cabins, people woke in panic. Mothers screamed, fathers grabbed their children, tourists shouted in disbelief as the waterline dropped before their eyes. Decks cracked and collapsed. Jet skis tipped over in the mud. Cabins tilted, foundations snapping as the ground beneath them turned soft and unstable. What had taken millions of dollars to build was destroyed in hours. The lake was gone. The cabins, those 139 symbols of arrogance, were left broken, splintered, half swallowed by mud and silence. Elijah stood and watched. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. He simply watched as nature reclaimed what was always hers. The HOA tried to fight back. They filed lawsuits, demanded he pay damages. But when the courts saw the truth, saw the papers, saw that the dam was his, they had no choice. The law was clear. Elijah had every right to do what he had done. In the end, he didn't just drain a lake. He drained their greed. The cabins rotted in the mud. Tourists never returned. And in time, the river that once fed the land returned to life. Fish swam upstream. Trees sprouted where cabins once stood. Birds returned to nest in the silence. Nature had taken back what was stolen. And Elijah, he sat on the old stones of the dam, his reflection shimmering in the shallow waters that remained. For the first time in years, he felt peace. Because in the end, it wasn't about revenge. It was about respect. Respect for the land, for his family, for the legacy they had built. And he had proven one truth no HOA could deny. You can build on nature. You can take from her. You can abuse her. But in the end, nature always wins.